I don't know where that's on there.
No, perhaps it hasn't been written up yet because we're
Oh, just to go behind.
only last Tuesday, you see.
Okay.
Yeah, it hasn't been written up yet.
Yeah.
It will be because it's going to be pushing forward. So,
Can do, yeah.
Okay, could we start the live feed, please?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this meeting of the South Planning Committee here at Theatre 7 today. I ask all people to switch off their mobile phones, please. And would you refrain from talking in the audience, because we want to make sure we hear what the speakers have to say and to make sure what the members of the committee have to say. So I'll hand you over to Kim now with the fire regulations. Thank you.
Okay, there's no planned fire alarm test this afternoon. The theatre operates a managed evacuation procedure, and you will be assisted and directed by a member of the theatre staff to the nearest fire exit in the event of an evacuation. The assembly point is Frankwell Short Stay Car Park. Toilets are located on the river side of the building on every floor. The wearing of masks is mandatory when in the theatre building, but may be removed if you are speaking in committee. Please observe social distancing rules at all times.
Thank you. We're now going to apologies. We apology from Richard Huffer, and Councillor Nigel Hartin is substituting for Richard. And we have a late apology from Councillor Andy Boddington, but we have no substitute for Councillor Boddington. Thank you. We've got public questions. Item number 2, there are no public questions. Could I ask members of the committee to introduce themselves, please, starting with Tony Parsons.
Councillor Tony Parsons, representing Basin Hill, Colham and Sutton.
Councillor Richard Marshall, member for the Worfield Division.
Councillor Nigel Lumbey, representing Old Brighton.
Councillor Hilary Luff, representing Church Stretton and Craven Arms.
Caroline, please.
Councillor Caroline Bagnall, representing Broseley.
Councillor Nigel Hartin, Clan Division.
Councillor Nick Hignett, Ray Valley Ward.
Councillor Trewellen, Highley Ward.
Oh, sorry. Robert Tyndall, I represent Brown Clee Division.
Councillor David Evans, representing Church Stretton and Craven Arms, and also chair of this committee.
Kim Brown, solicitor.
Tim Rogers, Area Planning Manager.
Andrew Shirakowski, Consultant Planner.
Thank you very much. We now go into disclosure pecuniary interest. Anybody, you got any interest to disclose, please? No? No pecuniary interest? No? Thank you very much. We now move on to the next item, which is item 4, and this land adjoining Padman House, Cape Street, Broseley. Thank you. Officer.
Yes, hello. Thank you, Chair. This is quite a long outstanding application, as you'll see from the application number. It dates back from originally to 2018 and has been through a significant number of iterations during the period for consideration. But it relates to the demolition of an existing workshop, the erection of 4 dwellings and a detached garage, and the formation of a vehicular access on land adjoining Padman House at Cape Street, Broseley. I think if we start with the PowerPoint, please. If we can. So that shows you the application site. You'll see that it's a site that's surrounded on a number of sides by existing properties, and you'll also see, well, you don't get from that picture, but it's quite there's quite a significant slope on part of the site as well. It's within Broseley, and it's also within a conservation area, as is referred to within your pack. If we could go to the next slide, please. It's not moving forward, is it? I don't know who's controlling. Sorry, that's a larger scale plan of the site. You'll see Padman House in the bottom right-hand corner of the site, and the land formerly formed part of the curtilage to Padman House. You'll see Padman's alley at the bottom of that display, and the road is to the east side, just off the plan there. If we could move on to the next slide, please. I can't see those very well from... So there you can see Cape Street on the eastern part of that slide before you. Padman House again in the bottom right-hand corner. That's the site as existing, I think, with some garages to be demolished with in the middle of the slide there. Those are the floor plans of Padman Lodge, which is part of one of the dwellings that form part of the proposal. I'm just intending to run through these quite quickly. You'll see that they are, that's Padman Lodge, the proposed elevations. You'll see that the upper floor has dormer windows, with the property has a relatively low eaves height. It's designed in a cottage style. Apologies, my computer just runs through pretty poorly. That gives you some idea of the slope through the site that I mentioned in introducing the application. I could do with some assistance here.
We've got the elevations up.
Yeah.
The elevations are on the screen at the moment.
Yeah, I know. Excuse me, could you just bear with me 1 second, please? Apologies for that, Chair, and the delay. So yeah, running through the slides, that's Padman Lodge, one of the dwellings that's proposed, and as I've just said previously, designed in a fairly cottage style with the dormer windows serving the upper floors, which keeps the eaves level lower on the properties. Could we move to the next slide, please? That's a plan showing the topographical levels on the site at the moment. As I said previously, there is quite a significant slope across part of the site, which we'll see on the next slides. If we could move that forward, please. So you'll see there's quite a significant slope with this on the sections that are provided as part of the application. Next slide, please. And then part of the site, I think, it has lesser of a slope on it. I think that's the part closest to the highway. You'll see the difference in levels is significantly reduced at that section of the site. Next slide, please. This is a plan showing the access into the site. And the parking that's going to be provided. The proposal includes parking for all of the proposed dwellings. It includes new garaging for Padman House itself, but also includes some parking for two of the properties across Cape Street. So the parking spaces closest to the tree there in the bottom of the plan are those identified for the neighbouring properties. If we could have the next slide, please. So that's the plan showing two of the proposed properties. You'll see the semi-detached. I will get to a proposed site plan, so you can kind of orientate where all of these proposed dwellings are. Next slide, please. Sorry, that seems to be a repeat of a previous plan. So if we can move on. And again. So these are floor plans of the proposed dwellings, which are reasonably substantial dwellings. Those are the two cottages that we saw on the previous slide. You'll see they're a mirror image, or almost a mirror image of each other. Again, if we can move on, please. So those showing the elevations of the proposed dwellings, and you'll note because of the slope, the height is significantly increased on the west elevation from that on the east elevation. Again, if we can move on with the slides, please. And that's the dwelling in the most northerly part of the site, which is labelled there as Padman Grange. Again, if we could move on, please. That's the floor plans for Padman Grange, and the next slide should be the elevations to that property. Again, you'll see the use of dormer-type windows, traditional kind of appearance, use of chimneys, and again, just note the difference in levels and therefore the difference in height of the dwelling on the eastern and western elevations. If we could move on to the next slide, please. That's the one that I wanted in terms of the overall proposed site layout. So you've got Cape Street on the eastern part of that slide running north to south. The axis in that I indicated or you saw on a previous slide with the tree immediately to the south of the axis. Padman Lodge to the north of the axis, then the parking spaces for the properties across Cape Street, and then parking. Each of the dwellings will have their own off-street parking areas. To the bottom, you've got Padman's house or Padman House, and which is served by an access off Padman Alley, and immediately to the north, to the northwest of Padman House, there is a kind of a hip-to-roof building shown on that plan, which would be a new garage to serve Padman House. If you can move on with the slide, please. I'm just going to run through these. So these are showing the proposed dwellings on the by section through the site, and again you'll note the significant slope on part of the site. Next slide, please. So again, sections through the site, you'll see that top section stroke elevation is along Cape Street, and then the bottom section is running through the site, which shows the difference in levels on the site. If we could move to the next slide, please. Sorry. This is a kind of expanded part of the proposed site plan, and that focuses on Padman House itself, and again shows you the positioning of the hipped roof new garage, in the northwestern corner of the garden that will remain with Padman House. And you'll note just to the north of that, it says Cape Street's residence parking. That's for the properties across the road. And then slightly angled to that is the parking for Padman Cottages, which is the first one of the pair of semi-detached dwellings that I've shown you on earlier slides. Can I have the next slide, please? That's just an elevation and floor plan of the garage that would be provided for Padman House. Next slide, please. So this is these are photographs that are taken on Cape Street. The access into the site would be formed where part of that wall would need to be removed to provide the access in. As you can see that from the photographs, there are cars parked along the highway at that point adjacent to the wall. You will see from the report before you that parking is a significant, or the impact on parking is a significant concern of local residents. And I'll come on to that shortly in respect of the detailing of the proposal. But as I've also said, there is the intention to provide some off-road parking for some of the properties on Cape Street. Go to the next slide, please. No, I think this is yes. The details above the photographs explain that those are existing buildings on the left-hand side of those photographs. Those are existing buildings to be demolished, and the right-hand side shows the existing driveway into Padman Alley, looking north from inside the site, the application site. If you can have the next slide, please. So, view from inside the site, looking towards properties on Cape Street, is the left-hand photograph there. Beyond what you can see of the site there in that photograph will be the wall that forms the boundary to Cape Street with the parking adjacent. And then the second one of those slides, the right-hand one of those slides, is from within the site, looking west towards existing dwellings in Speeds Lane. So again, that highlights some of the slope within the site and down to adjacent properties. Have the next slide, please. Again, views looking towards Speeds Lane from within the site. And the next one, please. View looking northwest towards the northern boundary of the site from within the heart of the site. Again, just picking up the fact that there is a significant slope on the site there at that point. On the next slide, please. That's fine, thank you. Members will see from the report, and as I've alluded to earlier, it's been an application which has been subject to quite a bit of negotiation and discussion in order to try and get to a solution that officers could support. You will see that there are still, notwithstanding those discussions and those amendments, there are still outstanding objections from a number of parties, including an objection from Broseley Town Council, who are of the opinion that the development doesn't offer a satisfactory solution in terms of its relationship with the conservation area and the need to preserve or enhance the character of the conservation area. And there are also concerns about the impact on parking, or the ability for on-street parking, and the fact that a number of parking spaces will be lost as a result of the highway impact. Well, firstly, the concerns about the relationship with the conservation area and the impact on the conservation area are not shared by the council's conservation team. Their comments are reported at 4.5 and 4.6 of the report before you, and subject to conditions, they are satisfied that the proposal is a satisfactory development within the conservation area. And at 4.7 of the report, again, I point out that Shropshire Council's Highways Department have raised no objection to the granting of consent, provided that it's carried out in accordance with the approved plans, and thereby provides some off-street parking for residents of Cape Street. You'll see reference at 4.7 of the report to the possibility of the developer being contributing to a traffic regulation order to try and overcome concerns about the potential impact on parking and traffic movement. But ultimately, you will also see later in the report at the officer assessment of the proposal that the Highways Department have accepted that is not actually necessary or required. It's not essential to make the development acceptable, and therefore it wouldn't meet the tests to be applied either by use of a condition or by the imposition of a Section 106 agreement. So that requirement is not being recommended as part of or not being required as part of the recommendation before you. It is acknowledged that parking will be displaced, but it must also be recognised that there is the intention to provide off-street parking, which will compensate to some degree for any other loss. And of course, local residents don't currently, whilst there may be parking taking place along that wall, local residents are availing themselves of that opportunity. They don't have a right to park in any particular location. So the report sets out in some detail the primary considerations. Obviously, those are firstly the principle of development, and this is clearly within Broseley. It's part of Broseley. It's surrounded to a significant extent by existing development, and the principle of development on this site is not in question as far as the adopted policies are concerned. But of course, it is within a conservation area, and the impact on the character and appearance of the conservation area is a significant material consideration. the consideration is set out on page 17 of your report there, and as I've said, the Council's conservation team have been consulted and have come after a number of changes to the scheme to a position whereby they are satisfied that it's acceptable in terms of its impact on the conservation area. It's considered that the siting, scale and design of the proposed dwellings are now acceptable on balance. As you've seen the elevations, they are quite traditional in appearance, and they do avail themselves of those lower eaves because of the use of dormers to serve the upper floor. Highways I've already touched on, and the final response from Highways in respect of the highway implications, and again, subject to conditions, it's considered to be acceptable in terms of the highway impact. It's also considered that the proposal will have a satisfactory relationship with surrounding development, so that there won't be any undue loss of residential amenity to any of the surrounding properties. And then you'll also see, kind of within the later elements of section 6 of the report, reference to ecology and drainage considerations, land stability and contamination considerations, and please note that the recommendation comes with a significant number of conditions, which include both further investigation in relation to land stability and land contamination being undertaken before any actual development commences on site. I think, Chair, that's all I intend to say at this point, other than in conclusion, and as set out at section 7 of the report, officers are of the opinion that, subject to the significant number of conditions set out there, that the application has now reached a point at which it is acceptable in terms of its design and its relationship with the conservation area, the highway implications and the impact on or the relationship with surrounding development, and the recommendation is for approval subject to those conditions as set out. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tim. We have some speakers on this. I must remind the local members of each planning area that if you are a local member, once you've read your 5 minutes of speech, then you must leave the table and take no part in the debate. So if local members understand that, that's fine, thank you. We now have the Broseley Town Council have sent in a letter, and it'll be read by Kim Brown, our solicitor. Thank you, Kim.
Yes, this is a statement from Councillor Ian West, Chair of Broseley Town Council Planning Committee, who says, this application has divided opinion within Broseley, but the Town Council accepts the principle of this development of 4 dwellings on this site and considers that it complies with the policies for the Broseley Conservation Area in our town plan and the emerging neighbourhood development plan. Concerns were expressed at the outset about the impact of the development on the view of the town when approached from the west. These concerns were shared by the Conservation Officer. This has been mitigated to some extent by the redesign of the unit known as Padman Grange, as described in sections 4.5 and 4.6 of the Officer's report. However, serious concerns remain about the impact of the development, both during construction and on completion, on traffic in Cape Street, which is very narrow and is a bus route. This view was endorsed as recently as this month in the comments provided by Shropshire Council's Developing Highways Manager, as described in section 4.7 of the Officer's report. This proposes that should the application be approved, a section 106 agreement be secured to fund a traffic regulation order should it transpire that the development has led to highway obstruction. This recommendation is absent from the final recommendations for approval. Broseley Town Council strongly urges this committee to follow the advice of the Council's Highways Officer and secure a section 106 agreement as described. Broseley Town Council also requests that robust planning conditions be imposed to ensure that Cape Street is not obstructed in any way during the construction of the development, including, for example, by contractors, vehicles or plant. This requirement is also highlighted in the comments provided this month by Shropshire Council's Developing Highways Manager. Thank you, Chair.
I now call on the local member, Caroline Bagnall, please. You have 5 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm the member representing Broseley, and part of the proposed development falls within my area. I also live not very far from Cape Street, so I know the area well. My concerns about this development are twofold. The first being highways issues. We've already heard something of that. Cape Street's a very narrow road, as you've seen on the photographs, typical of many in Broseley, and it's on a bus route, and we don't get many of those in Broseley. At present, on-street parking means that vehicles frequently have to mount the pavement in order to pass, and it's also the case when vehicles need to pass each other. This causes damage to the pavements and associated risks to pedestrians. The west side of Cape Street is currently used for parking by residents and visitors to houses in the immediate area. This will be restricted by the proposed development, and therefore there's a need for strict planning conditions to be imposed in order to prevent vehicles obstructing or parking in Cape Street during the period of construction. I welcome the addition of parking places being provided for the residents of numbers 3 and 4 Cape Street as part of the planned development. However, I firmly believe that consideration needs to be given to the provision of a Section 106 contribution, as recommended in the report by Gemma Lawley, the Developing Highways Manager. This would allow for a traffic regulation order to be introduced if, on completion of the development, it's found that vehicles displaced by this cause an obstruction. The second issue I wanted to raise is that of boundary walls. The wall currently forming the boundary between the property and Cape Street is constructed of old Broseley-type bricks and includes attractive decorative features. The preservation of brick boundary walls is a firm policy within Broseley's existing town plan and the emerging neighbourhood development plan. I believe that a condition should be attached to any planning consent to ensure that any replacement of this wall would use traditional materials, reusing the bricks from the original wall where possible, and retaining the existing decorative features. This would help to preserve some of the important character of the area. Thank you.
I now call on Tony Rowland, please, the agent. Yeah, use that one over there, yeah, please. And you have 3 minutes to address the committee.
Okay, is this one on, is it? Or are we on? Yep. Okay, just to say that we agree really with what Caroline said, and we're quite happy with any conditions that would like to be imposed. Cape Street is very busy, and it obviously is a bus route. At the moment, buses do struggle to get down there. So actually by creating off-street parking, we should actually improve the situation along that road, and it should actually improve the situation for the buses that try and get down there. The only other thing I really wanted to sort of raise on this one was the only objection we really have is the town council. And the town council have changed their minds a lot over the course of the past 2 or 3 years with regards to this application. When it first went in, it wasn't an objection to do with the effect upon the conservation area. It was, well, when it first went in, they were neutral. There was no objection to the application. And that was for 4 houses and 2 garages. And during the course of the application, we've actually reduced it from 4 houses to 1 garage. And then when we did that, they objected due to the scale of the development, whereas we'd actually reduced the scale. So they were happy with 4 houses and 2 garages, but when we reduced it, they thought there was too much, which seemed a bit strange. Yeah, so we just really wanted to highlight that fact, that actually we've been working, obviously, with the planners over the past couple of years. The main reason that it's taken 2.5 years is that there was a landslip on Bridge Road about probably 2 years ago. And our sort of application fell within that sort of period. We were asked to do an investigation report, which we did, but the council actually lost it for 1.5 years. And I think it took 15 months to get a response. And that's obviously what held everything up. So hopefully, you know, bearing in mind of all of that, you know, we hope that because it's in the development boundary, it will improve the parking arrangements, and hopefully, you know, we're happy to accept any recommendations and you know, fall in line with, you know, what the clients and the locals would like. Okay.
Thank you. Are there any questions, please, from Mr. Rowland before he leaves, sir? No? Okay, thank you very much, sir. Right, I now up to committee, please. Who wants to... Councillor Tyndall, please.
Thank you. Could we just look at the slides showing the elevation of the garage? The rest of the design looked really nice, but I was just... Yes. Did the planning officer request that hip roof on the south and north elevations? I know there's a reference in the report to the hip roof.
The answer to that is I'm not sure, Councillor Tyndall, but maybe the agent could answer that question better than I, because I wasn't directly involved in any negotiation.
Sorry, I can't.
It does reduce the overall bulk, but I take your point about the hippings.
Thank you. And can I just ask, at page 9, 4.16, the Coal Authority, has this intrusive site investigations now been carried out? Are we happy that it's safe to build there? Or is it a condition? Sorry, I couldn't quite...
There has a report been undertaken which the Coal Authority has concurred with, but there is a condition requiring further investigation that's part of the recommendation before you. I think it's condition 10 on the list of conditions at the end.
Thank you. And
Councillor
that would
Parsons.
presumably be at the applicant's expense.
Councillor Parsons, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to move the officer's recommendations for this together with the two conditions which the applicant appears to be willing to accept, the section 106 and the rectification of the wall as best as can be with the materials that are already there. It doesn't appear to be too controversial, so I'll move that that recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor Parsons. Councillor, Mr. Rogers, Tim Rogers, please.
Sorry, Chair. Yes, through you, Chair. Just to can I refer members to condition 16, which does require the details of all new walls and other means of enclosure to be submitted and approved. And of course, given the sensitivities around that wall along Cape Street, we would involve our conservation team in the assessment of any details submitted for replacement or repair of the wall along Cape Street. So I think in all probability that should be covered adequately by that condition. Just with regard to the section 106 or condition relating to parking, the difficulty is not and the question isn't around whether the applicant is willing to accept that, it's whether it's appropriate to impose it as a requirement. And in order for us to impose it as a requirement, it would have to be, the highway impact would have to be severe, and it would have to be, as I said before, it would have to be necessary or essential to make the development acceptable. Now, the development is making provision for two properties across the road, 3 and 4 Cape Street, and there will, and it's acknowledged that there will be a loss of parking along the Cape Street to provide the access. But the fact of the matter is that if there is more parking displaced than is replaced, and that causes an issue for people who would normally park there, A, they don't have a right to park there, and secondly, they shouldn't, as a consequence, be parking in a way which obstructs the highway. And that is what would cause the problem. It's not the development per se, because clearly you can't properly judge how much parking it might displace or what the addition, how that parking might take place. It's the behaviour of the individuals, unfortunately. So we do not feel that it would be appropriate to impose that condition or even a section 106 requiring that, because, as I say, it's not essential to make the development acceptable. It has been improved by the provision of parking for at least two of the properties on Cape Street itself.
Thank you. Councillor Agnew, please.
Thank you, Chair. I like the look of the layout of the site, and I'm quite happy with the details that have been provided to us. I never think that on-street parking is a good option when other possibilities for parking are available, but I do think that when the new entrance is made, there will need to be some policing or some markings on the street, because in my opinion, motorists will not necessarily take any notice of the rules and regulations that say you shouldn't park within a certain distance of a junction. And I think, although we've got problems on street with the parking there at the moment, this may continue even right adjacent to the junction. So I think the police or highways will perhaps need to look at that to make sure that they do something about the parking around that junction. But with that proviso, I'm quite happy to second Councillor Parsons' proposal for going with the officer recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any other speakers, please? Right, we have a proposal and a seconder for the development. All those in favour of the officer's recommendation, show your hands, please. That is unanimous. Thank you. Caroline, you can now come back to the table, please. We now go on to item number 5, which is Carriage Close, Albrighton. And I believe it's Andrew, the case officer. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Just before I start, to make members aware, there's 2 additional late representations on the late representations list, which are the first 2 on the list. Just for those new members of the committee, what we do is we have an additional list that we present at committee, and these are the representations that came in after the committee report was drafted and circulated. So we don't pull down the shutters, as it were, just because we've reached that point. So that's why you'll see at each committee there's invariably a list with additional representations. There's one there from Albrighton Parish Council, where you'll notice they've actually requested deferral of consideration of the application today, because they themselves have not had an opportunity to meet since the elections to consider further revised details on the application, albeit that they have commented on the substantive issues that they've been particularly concerned about. And I believe we've got a speaker today from the Parish Council as well. Turning to the application itself, the application is an application for the erection of 18 residential dwellings, including garaging and parking, including a new access road. It involves the demolition of a bungalow that's on the site, followed by redevelopment. The development would include the provision of 2 affordable housing units. The rest of the units are essentially open market. And there's a breakdown on page 40 of your reports, which provides the details of the house types and sizes. So you'll see there's a mixture there of bungalows, of terrace housing, or terrace bungalows, I think they actually are, and different sizes of detached houses. I think what I'll do first, Chair, is if I run through the slides, you'll have seen from having read the report that there's quite considerable public comment on this, as well as comments from Albrighton Parish Council, and it's actually easiest in many ways to go through the slides and just look at the circumstances on the site to appreciate the comments that are being made. So if we could run through the slides, starting with the first slide, please. Right, the site itself is located on the very south side of Albrighton. The very bottom of the plan that you can see there is essentially the edge of the built-up area of Albrighton. So the rectangles that you see at the very bottom of the screen are at the beginning of the open fields to the south of Albrighton. The main street is at the top of your screen there, and you'll see on the right-hand side that there's a track running down to the west side of the red line boundary. That's the existing access into the site. The site at the moment is essentially a domestic garden, a fairly large one at that. There are two main buildings on the site. There's the main existing residential property, White Gates, which on that plan is the bit that's essentially cut out from the rest of the red line boundary, and the intention is to retain that house. It's a bungalow. And then just to the north of that, there's a second building, which is essentially a dwelling house as well, and that will be demolished. So one of the two properties that essentially on the site will be demolished and cleared. You'll see on the left-hand side of the screen there, there's a fairly long, thin section. That's where the new access into the site will be created from Garage Close. So in essence, you've got a position in terms of access where the existing driveway in will be closed off for vehicular, for the purposes of vehicular access, and then your new access will be created from Garage Close to the west. If we can move on to the next slide, please. I'm sorry if this is not very clear. It's probably clearer on your screens than it is on the overhead screen for those people who are watching in the auditorium. That's essentially the site plan as it is at the moment. Really the key point to draw from that plan, and I'm sorry if it's not very clear on the screen, is that really one of the key characteristics of this site is that there's a substantial level of tree cover. And what that plan there is showing is the tree cover on the site, so you can see all the sort of circular outlines of the trees, and you'll see I've set out in some detail in the report, mainly under the comments from the tree officer, the detail of the number of trees on the site. So you'll see in paragraph 4.13, the tree survey that's been undertaken shows that there's 142 trees, tree groups, woody shrubs and hedges within the site, of which a fairly substantial proportion are what's termed early mature or older. So it's one of the key sort of characteristics of the site. If we can have the next slide, please. This is the layout plan. If you bear in mind that what you've just seen in the previous slide which shows the trees, you'll appreciate from that fairly rapidly that one of the key aspects of this proposal is that it is going to require the removal of a significant proportion of the trees as is set out in the report. Although the intention as far as possible is to retain some of the key trees on the site. You'll see on the southern boundary there at the bottom of the screen, you can just see the outlines of a number of trees along that boundary. They're actually covered by a tree protection order, and the intention is to retain those trees as far as possible. At the left-hand end of the development, you can see there'll be a line of three bungalows, which two of which will be the two affordable dwellings there. There's actually 2 or 3 fairly large trees just where the access would come in from Garage Close. And one of the key elements of the design, and I've got a more detailed slide that I'll show you in a little bit, is to find a way to construct that access into the site whilst retaining the main trees at that end of the site. And what's proposed here is what's called a no-dig construction to the access, where essentially you don't excavate into the ground, so you're not interfering with the roots of the trees. I'll come back to that in more detail shortly. Just in terms of the layout, you can see there from the layout, you'll see there's one large block in the middle towards the top boundary. That is the block of floor flats, if you like. The rest of the properties are either detached properties or there's the terrace that's there. But that larger block is the one that makes up the flats. The hatched areas on that plan, and again, I've got a more detailed plan, which I'll show you in a little bit, are the areas of open space provision on the site. If we could have the next slide, please. That's the detail of the access, and it's quite a key part of the application. You can see the larger trees shown there in the grey outline. And you'll see where the access effectively curves round from the end of Garage Close, and it essentially is wrapping itself around. I can't see the number. T32, I think, is the number on the plan there. So the access has wrapped itself around the edge of the tree. Obviously, it's going to pass underneath it to an extent, but as I say, the idea is to use what's called a no-dig construction, so that you don't actually excavate and damage the roots of the tree. And the next slide, please. The next few slides are the elevations. I haven't bothered to include all the floor plans simply to keep the number of slides down. Otherwise, we'd have an extremely large number of slides. But if we can just gradually scroll through these, it's really just to give you an idea of the design of the houses. They're much of a muchness. They're predominantly two-storey detached houses with hipped roofs. They've tried to a degree, as I've set out in the report, pick up on some of the design cues from the conservation area in terms of having things like windows that are proportioned, that are so they're taller rather than wide. There are bay windows, as you'll see on this one. But having said that, as I've set out in the report, if you go to Albrighton High Street, it tends to be dominated more by what are essentially more traditional townhouses rather than large individual houses. That's the block of the 4 flats. If we can just keep scrolling through here, I don't need to say too much about the detailed design of the individual buildings that are proposed. There's a fairly consistent theme, as I think you'll see from the plans. If we can just keep going through, as I say, much of a muchness. If we just keep on scrolling through. And some of the houses have got separate garages. Not all of them, but some of them have. That's the elevation of the bungalows, which will be at the entrance from Garage Close. And as I say, two of those are intended to be affordable dwellings. I think, that's the detail of the no-dig construction. It's just intended to show you how the road is actually constructed. So you've got the original ground levels at the bottom, and then you build the road on top rather than excavating down into the tree roots to try and protect the trees. This plan here is it's actually the drainage plan. One of the key things on the site is the fact that they've had to build in some attenuation for drainage. The blue line, the area outlined in blue in the sort of central right-hand side of the plan is essentially a drainage pond. It does coincide, and you'll see that there's a comment on this in the report, with part of the area that's designated as open space, and that issue has been raised by the tree officer in the tree officer's comments as to whether or not it really adequately meets the requirement for the amount of open space provision. Again, for those members who are new to the committee, we have a requirement for the degree of public open space that's provided, which we expect to see in multiple house developments. I have to be frank and say we don't necessarily always enforce it with an absolute degree of sort of hard, in terms of hard and fast application, but we do aim to get as close to the level of provision or more. On paper, there's actually the provision here is actually exceeded as set out in the report, but in reality, the part of that area is taken up by the drainage scheme. If we can have the next slide, please. This is the plan that shows you which trees are being retained and which trees are being lost. So I think I'm afraid you may not see it very clearly on that plan, but there are trees outlined in red on that plan. It's not too hard to spot where they are because it's where the buildings are going to go, basically. And then the trees are retained. The trees that are retained are the ones in blue around the edge. So it'll give you an idea of how much of the site will actually be affected in terms of tree loss, and I'll show you more photographs shortly. And if we can have the next slide, please. That's just a more specific plan showing the open space provision that's being provided on the site. So it's the areas hatched in green. As I say, the dark area in the sort of central left-hand part of the site is the bit where the flood attenuation is going to go. And if we can move on to the next slide. Right, these are the photographs. I've put in quite a number of photographs here because I think it's quite important just in order to understand the comments that have been made on this application, particularly by the local residents. Just starting at the eastern end of the site, this is the current point of access in off Albrighton High Street. So this photograph is taken on Albrighton High Street, and the access is through that gap between the houses. As I say, this will be closed off and will cease to be used for vehicular access, but the intention is to retain it as pedestrian access. So there's a direct pedestrian access between the site and Albrighton High Street. And if we just go fairly slowly through the slides, and the first thing we'll do is we'll just go up that alley to give you a flavour of what it's like. So that's just moving up it. If we go on to the next slide, you'll see it's a fairly narrow access at the moment, and it's too narrow to be retained as the main vehicular access into the site. That's the view looking back towards Albrighton High Street as you're coming up that lane. And you'll see from this, it turns into quite a narrow, tree-lined driveway, and it's more what you would expect as a private driveway to an individual house rather than an access road into a housing estate, which is really why it's not practical to retain it, particularly given the closeness of the trees to the access. So if we can just move on to the next slide, and eventually at the end you come round to the gate and come through the gate. And then we open out and into the site itself, and you'll see immediately from that slide how the site is. Is this big open residential, essentially a wooded residential curtilage. That's the open section that's in the middle, but there are substantial trees around, particularly around the periphery of the site. You'll see White Gates as the bungalow in the background there. That's just a more detailed view, and that's the building that will be retained. You can see the larger trees in the background. This is the building. This is the other building that's on the site, which is essentially a second residential property. That will be demolished. The western boundary of the site is fairly close in behind that, and there are a number of conifers there. And then if we, this is almost doing a sort of U-turn, looking back towards the entrance. So again, you'll get a sense there of the fairly large scale of the trees on the site. They're mixed. Some of them are conifers, some of them are deciduous trees. But you'll see that there are quite a number of really quite large trees on the site. And the next slide. Again, this is just to give you a flavour of the site. There's one or two outbuildings there, but again, yet more trees. And then up on the northern side of the site, which is the area you'll see in the report where part of the site falls into the Albrighton Conservation Area. It's just that section on the northern half of the site that falls within the conservation area. I think on the plan that's on your agenda, it's the darker area that's included on that plan. This bit is slightly more wild and overgrown, let's put it like that at the moment. But again, it does include a number of trees on the site. The next slide. This is now coming to the western end of the site, and the next few photographs are the ones that are particularly relevant to the objections that have been made by the residents of Garage Close. The access into the site is from Newhouse Lane. This is Newhouse Lane, and Garage Close is just where the curb is curving round on the left-hand side of that photograph. Albrighton Primary School starts roughly where that car is parked on the road. So the primary school is located to the southwest of the site, essentially. And you'll see from the comments that have been made by the local residents that one of the issues with this point of access is that Garage Close itself is quite heavily used by parents bringing kids to school, and particularly I think at the pick-up point in the afternoon. So I've just taken a sequence of photographs here going up Garage Close to give you a flavour of what Garage Close is actually like. It's a shared surface. It does have a pavement for part of its length. But that it only goes so far. So as we follow this sequence of photographs up, you'll see here we've now reached the point where there's no pavement in Garage Close, and that photograph gives you an idea of the narrowness. There is some on-street parking, for want of a better way of putting it, already by local residents there. But you'll see from that photograph it is quite narrow. But this would be the way through to the new site. This development was constructed in around about 2000, and my understanding it was constructed with the intention that access would ultimately be taken through into the application site, which is, as I've set out in the plan, is an allocated housing site. And this just takes you through up to the end of Garage Close. I think if we go on to the next photograph, yeah, this is actually beyond the end of Garage Close now, where there's a small section of land. This is where that detailed plan I showed you of the access in with the no dig construction. This is that area. So the affordable housing, the three bungalows would be built just on the right-hand side of this photograph. This is currently, I believe it's actually a bridleway, not just a public right-of-way, which runs through from the end of Garage Close and then goes around the southern boundary of the site. These are part of the TPO trees you see in front of us here. So the access would come through here and then curve round to the left of those larger trees. And I'm not sure if that's the last photograph. So hopefully you'll appreciate from that, and I've deliberately put in those photographs, particularly of Garage Close, just so you can appreciate the comments that have been made by the local residents. I won't say too much about the detail of the application. I mean, you've been through the report. You'll see there's a number of key issues that arise out of this application. The first one, in terms of the principle of the development, as I've set out in the report, this is an allocated housing site in the SAMDEV plan. It's allocated for up to 20 houses, and there's a housing guideline for the benefit of the new members who are maybe not fully familiar with the SAMDEV, where we've got allocated housing sites. We include a bit more detail in the SAMDEV, which sets out the details of what's envisaged for each of those allocations. So we may set a number or a maximum number of houses. We may set additional details about what the type and form of development here is. So in the housing guideline for here in the SAMDEV, the allocation is made for up to 20 houses. Doesn't mean it's got to be 20 houses, and it does make reference to it potentially being suitable for the elderly, and that there is a proportion of the dwellings that are provided are essentially appropriate for elderly occupants. So in terms of the principle of the development here, because it's an allocated site, essentially the principle is established through the SAMDEV. Other issues that have been raised, the key ones that have been raised, probably the main one, particularly in relation to the objections, is the issue of highways and access and pedestrian safety raised by the residents of Garage Close because of that point of access through Garage Close. We've had some photographs submitted by the local residents which actually show Garage Close fairly well clogged up with cars at pick-up time at the end of the day by parents picking up from the school. So there's an issue there. We need to be a little bit careful with that, because in itself you can't use the planning application as a means to start addressing issues that don't arise from the development, but on the other hand you can't completely ignore them in terms of the issues that are raised. So you'll have picked up from the report there's a fairly strong body of opinion amongst the residents in Garage Close about the use of that access, and that needs to be weighed a little bit against the fact that it is an allocated site and it's always been intended that should be the point of access. You'll appreciate, in terms of the third issue, the trees on the site are clearly a major issue there, and there's a significant loss of trees. The application was going to come forward to the committee earlier in the year, but essentially how to deal with the trees was one of the outstanding issues. We had an initial proposal from the applicant as mitigation, partly to address the tree loss, and partly also to address the impact on ecology and the biodiversity net gain and the requirement for biodiversity net gain, to provide an off-site solution to do off-site mitigation by providing additional tree planting and habitat creation on another site. As I've set out in the report, that alternative site was around about 2.5 miles away. It just so happened it was outside Shropshire, only just, but it was. That was one of the things that sort of raised some difficulty. The council's tree officer has sort of raised again whether off-site mitigation is possible, as I've set out in the report, if the developer wants to continue with the level of development that's proposed on this site. But the problem with that is we then have to have a delivery mechanism, and at the moment there isn't really a delivery mechanism to take, for example, a financial contribution and deliver off-site mitigation. It would be open in theory for the developer to come forward with another specific proposal, but at this stage we don't have that on the table. So there's the issue there in terms of the impact on trees and ecology. There's the issue of design, whether it's appropriate, as I've set out in the report. The conservation officer has commented on the design of the development. We are partly in the conservation area here, so the question arises, is this really appropriate design in the conservation area? The conclusion here is that there is what in terms of the terminology used in the MPPF, there is considered to be less than significant harm under paragraph 196 of the MPPF. What you're required to do then is essentially balance the benefits that the development offers against the harm that has caused. So there's a balancing exercise. So one of the things you need to think about today in terms of the issues is, does the scheme actually offer sufficient benefit to outweigh that less than substantial harm? And you may feel and in line with the recommendation that it does, or you may feel actually to the contrary. As I've set out in the report, I think the issues on this application are quite finely balanced. So it's for you to make that determination. You don't have to agree with the recommendation if you feel that actually the balance is not so in favour of the development if it doesn't once you've carried out that balancing exercise under paragraph 196. I've mentioned the issue about open space provision, and as I say, the recommendation is to approve the application. You'll see it's subject to it will be subject not only to the conditions set out in the report, but also to a Section 106 agreement, because there is a requirement to provide a level of affordable housing provision, which would include partly on-site provision in this case, and partly an affordable contribution. Again, just for the benefit of the members who are new to the committee, it's a requirement where we've got beyond a certain number of houses on the site, that we'll always look for a proportion of the housing to be either affordable, or for there to be an affordable housing contribution, which essentially goes into a central pot and then funds provision elsewhere off-site. So that applies in this particular case. Those are the key issues. You'll see from the report, the recommendation is a non-balanced one, so that, and it's a quite finely balanced one. On the one hand, we do have the principle of the development on this site established by the development plan allocation, but there are also a number of issues related to the detail of how and what's being proposed on this site. So it really is a balancing exercise here today. So it's what, the bottom line is you need to consider the balance of what those issues are. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Tyndall's got a question for the officer. Go ahead, Councillor Tyndall.
Yes, my mathematics is never very good, but how do you get 20% of 18 is 2.7?
Okay, thank you. You're going to write that one out and come back to you, Councillor Tyndall. Right, we've got some speakers on this. We've got Maggie Bruin, who's against the application. If you'd like to take the podium, please.
Okay.
Thank you. You've got 3 minutes to address the committee. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm speaking on behalf of the residents of Garage Close, which is where I live. We truly believe that Garage Close cannot accommodate the additional traffic which will result from this development. I really wish I could make this presentation to you whilst we are all walking down Garage Close, so you could visualise our safety concerns and the impact this development will have for the residents. Access to Newhouse Lane and Garage Close is not wide enough for large construction vehicles to turn into without using the opposite side of the road, our first safety concern. And once in the close, there is no line of sight from the bottom to the top of the close. This is because of an S-bend which prevents you from seeing what is coming up and down the close, potentially another safety issue. And just to point out, I think as it's already been made, there is no footpath after the actual S-bend. 2 large construction vehicles will not be able to pass. So will we end up with construction vehicles queuing to access and leave the close? And also, for the residents, there is the lack of privacy this is going to concern. The large construction vehicles will be so close to our homes, particularly at the top where it is very narrow. There are also 2 properties which are actually side on to the road, so the construction traffic will just be thundering past them all the time. There's also the noise levels this development is going to cause, the dust that's created in our homes by the construction vehicles, and also the potential of damage to our properties. Over the past, we've raised numerous objections and concerns about school activity, the safety of school children, parking, walkers, because it's a bridle path, and with large construction traffic being added to this mix, we are potentially left with what could be some difficult and dangerous situations. And how long will this bill go on for? 2, 3 years? Who knows? And when the build is finished, these large properties will result in lots of cars, so there will be a large increase in the traffic. It's not the residents of the new properties that will be affected. For them, it's just an access road. It will be the existing residents of Garage Close who will suffer from the constant increased movement of traffic up and down the road and the noise this creates. There will be a huge impact on the residents. And do you have a duty of care for us, our health and our mental health? And one final point, this will result in a net loss of the values of our homes and with absolutely no net gain for any of us.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
I now ask Colin Noakes, please. Thank you, and you have 3 minutes to address the committee, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm here to register all Brighton Parish Council's objection to the current development proposal for this site. This site has long been earmarked for primarily small 1- and 2-bedroom units for older people. Indeed, when the site was originally removed from the Greenbelt, that was what was promised to the Parish Council. The proposal speaks to build predominantly 4- and 5-bedroom houses. This is not what all Brighton needs. There is already larger homes being built elsewhere in the village. This proposal appears cramped and is an overdevelopment of this site. The case officer states that the proposal complies with the adopted plan, in that a proportion of the units are 1- and 2-bedroomed, but a proportion could be any number between 1 and 19, not a hard policy to comply with. Members, please don't let the needs of the local residents fall victim to a poorly written and ambiguous planning policy. Policy S1 of the plan states, I quote, only development which would not prejudice the potential future uses of this land to meet all Brighton's longer development needs will be acceptable. It states further in the explanation of the policy at 4.4, all Brighton has an ageing population and that all Brighton requires a high proportion of 1- and 2-bedroom units. Therefore, these are the needs of all Brighton. And the proposal is contrary to policy S1 of the plan. I would draw members' attention to paragraph 6.17 of the officer's report, where the case officer has stated this site is ideal for housing for people of retirement age and that 4- and 5-bedroom houses could not be described as meeting a specific local need for retirement homes. He goes on to say that 4- and 5-bedroom houses are capable of occupation by people of retirement age, but in reality, what is the likelihood of this? There is currently a housing logjam in Brighton where elderly residents are trapped in family homes because there is a limited availability of smaller accommodation. These underoccupied homes are not only environmentally unfriendly, but also prevent growing families moving into larger homes within the village. This site offers a prime opportunity to bring forward a scheme that primarily provides for elderly residents. It has good pedestrian access to the village facilities. Smaller units would have less of a built footprint, providing for a greener and more spacious development, and perhaps we could save some trees. Elderly residents are also likely to use their vehicles less, therefore reducing traffic flow along Garage Close. The Parish Council would welcome the opportunity to work with the developer to bring forward a proposal that meets the needs of the residents but also gives them an acceptable return for their investment. The Parish Council would respectfully ask members that the needs of the residents are put before the profits of the developers and this application is refused.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you. I now call on Nigel Lumby, he's a local member, and you have 5 minutes to speak, sir. Thank you.
Members, I ask you to reject this application. You will decide this application on the balance of the evidence. In the report, the application can on balance be considered to be acceptable. That's not glowing, and I'm going to use the word balance a lot. The local plan. This area is designated in the local plan to be developed for people of retirement age, an identified need for the village. The local plan has other areas in the village where larger development is underway or planned, which is providing family homes. This is a small site set right behind the high street with a connecting footpath, ensuring all amenities are within a very short walk or mobility scooter ride. This development would encourage the retired in the village to move from their larger houses, so freeing up older housing stock that attracts younger families, especially settling forces families. And this represents a double win. The development guidelines say capable of occupation by people of retirement age, proportion of 1 or 2 bedroom units, and should respect and enhance the character and significance of the conservation area. In the report, large 4 and 5 bedroom houses not meeting the local need for retirement homes. The proposal is unfortunate and not making best use of the site. But it does say, nor could it be said that not capable of occupation by people of retirement age. Members, if you accept that conclusion about capable, then the applicant could have requested 10 times 5 bedroom houses on the site because they're all capable. Add the 3 bungalows and the 4 2-bedroom apartments of dubious appeal to retirees, that's 7 out of 18. Where's the balance? Traffic. West Mercia Police have concerns. Members will probably accept Garage Close was the intended access point, but the local plan intended and mitigated against traffic issues aiming for retired people. With fewer cars, especially as retirees got older, less vehicle journeys because of the superb access path to the paths, Garage Close navigation being undertaken by mature drivers invested in the sensitivities of the residents. Large family homes create more cars, more journeys, navigating the narrow roads with a less experienced mindset, and I'm being polite. Traffic volume only gets worse as the kids grow up and get their own cars. Has this mitigation and balance to the traffic problem been lost with this application? Trees. The report remain concerned that there will be a large net loss of trees, and of the remaining, most of these are in private gardens and may not be to the preference of future owners. The trees to the south block the sun for the big houses' back gardens, and they won't last, even with TPOs. Report, in terms of impact on trees and ecology, the merits are at best marginal and worse, not wholly adequate. Does this add to a positive balance? Conservation area report, the layout and style of housing proposed has little or nothing in common with the houses in the conservation area and are of no particular merit. Report at 646 doesn't agree with the applicant's design statement stating, whilst not poor, cannot be considered to be of any particular merit either. The presumption the site would be developed, albeit that this does not mean that the application gives carte blanche for poor or mediocre design. Site represents less than significant harm, and the MPPF, this harm needs to be weighed against the public benefit. People of Albrighton want and need retirement units on this dual site, so close to amenities. So where is the public benefit? Open space provision. The report, layout that is not ideal. Proportion of this space technically meets the legal minimum, but the report says a seasonable flood pond is not usable space. So is it really met? Another lost opportunity for balance. I'm not against larger homes on the site. I just want to see a balance. So in conclusion, there are very few positive words in this report for the application. Each area on its own does not give you the definitive reason, but cumulatively, that 49-51 balance of probability has not been met. Thank you. Oh, just one other thing. The report actually said the affordable homes needs to be 15% for this site. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lomby. I now call on Howard Thomas, please. The applicant. Oh, Howard Thomas for the applicant, sorry. You have 3 minutes to address the committee, so thank you.
Thank you. I could do with quite a lot longer because a lot of good points were raised, and In most cases, I think we've got very adequate responses, but I haven't got time. I would just reassure Mrs Bruin that if the site goes ahead, we will have a very comprehensive traffic management plan, and we will have deliveries scheduled in at intervals, so we won't have that scenario of many wagons on the road at the same time. SAMDEV has two principal requirements for this site, which have been discussed. A proportion of 1 in 2 bed units is sought within this development. 7 is 40%, which is quite substantial. It's not as if we've skimped. I think also, and this has been very comprehensive report from your officer, but he's missed a point. SAMDEV states the development should deliver housing capable of occupation by people of retirement age. In our application, we've said that all of the houses, the small ones and the big ones, would be built to lifetime standards, which means that either the residents themselves could stay in there and the house is adaptable for elderly and infirm people, or as often happened when we've done this before, elderly relatives can move into the house and be accommodated with the family. So we've gone a little bit further than the minimum to address that concern in SAMDEV. The application was consulted quite thoroughly before we submitted, which was last September, and we did take account of a lot of comments from the Sheffield Council and from your officers to get it before we submitted. Since which time, your drainage officers don't have a problem. Highways engineers say that the proposals are acceptable. And we've talked about conservation. Your conservation officers have said no significant impact on the conservation area. All things are obviously subjective. The ecologists and the tree officers are probably the reason that it's taken from September till now for this to be considered by yourselves as a committee. We've worked really hard to try and improve and address their concerns. We did, as Mr Stokowski suggested, look at off-site mitigation. We're still open to that, but we couldn't find anywhere, and the council couldn't find anywhere. We'd love to plant some more trees elsewhere. But both your ecologist and your tree officer in the report have said, and I sort of loosely quote, that the application, they've concluded the application can be approved with conditions. I'm not going to suggest to you that at Shropshire Homes this is the scheme which we will be most proud of, because we'd like to not just meet the bars that are set by litigation, by regulation, but exceed them. This has been a very, very difficult site to bring forward. The trees have been obviously one of the big concerns. If it wasn't for trees, we will be looking at 20 houses and not 18 houses. But your officers have concluded it's acceptable. We've addressed all the concerns that have been presented to us, and very much hope that as a committee you can support your officers' recommendation. Thank you.
Are there any questions, Mr Thorne, please? No? Thank you very much. Do you wish to come back, Andrew, on anything?
I'd just comment on our last point, if I may, Chairman, which is really to say it has been the case that the applicant has made quite a lot of effort over the last 4 or 5 months to address that point on tree loss. Clearly, there is a view which ultimately the tree officer and the council ecologist have commented on, where I think whilst they've acknowledged that the applicant has tried quite hard to address the concerns that there are in terms of the impact on trees and ecology, it's still not ideal at the end of the day. And I mean, I'm sure you'll sense from the comments that the final comments they've made that whilst they've suggested that the outstanding issues can be addressed by condition, we still have a position where there's net biodiversity loss, albeit there's a gain in terms of the hedgerows on the site. So, but I say that's not to take away from the applicant. They should be given credit for having actually tried quite hard over a number of months to come up with a solution.
Right, Councillor Tyndall, please.
Yes, I've just done the arithmetic again. It's 15%. Sorry, but why 15 when normally we ask for 20%? Is it because of the age of the application?
The figure, I mean, Tim may want to comment on this. The figure varies around the county. So if you'll find that I think the percentages, Tim, are between 10 and 20% variously around the county, aren't they? There is a map that defines what the percentage requirement is in different locations.
Yeah, I do believe, Councillor Tyndall, that 15% is the required amount for this area. So it does meet the policy requirement.
Councillor Marshall, please.
Thank you, Chair. Personally, I've got several concerns with this development. Under SAMDEV, yes, the land has been allocated and Garage Close was always seen to be the access point. And whilst, let's be honest, with every development, there's going to be some disruption to the local residents. I think the comment that concerns me the most with Garage Close is from West Mercia Constabulary, where they've actually put out concerns of the on-road parking down Garage Close. The other area is this with the retirement homes. With respect to the agent, I think the comment that the old people can move in with the young families in the 4 or 5 bedroom house doesn't actually really address the issue. That brushes it under the carpet. Albrighton does need retirement homes, and I certainly do not think that this development is providing that. When we're looking at the levels of 4 and 5 bedroom homes, I think that that's too excessive, and personally I will not be supporting this development today.
Thank you. Any other comments, please? Councillor Tyndall?
Yes, sorry, I marked it. Yes, 6.46 on page 53. I think that's opening the door for the committee, if it wants to suggest that the design should be improved, I mean, of the individual dwellings. Like Councillor Marshall, I'm not happy with the mix. I mean, to go from 1 5-bedroom and 2 4-bedroom and 2, yes. So that's 5 large houses out of 18. The slides showing the elevations didn't do much for my my liking, really. They look like, I have to use my words carefully, local government housing of 10, 20, 30 years ago. Stand to be corrected, and it's a subjective matter, but I think the fact that whilst it's not poor, cannot be considered to be any particular merit. I think if I was the architect of a scheme like this, I would like to feel that the planning committee or the planning officer felt that it was of merit. So, not happy about that.
Please.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just have clarification from the officers on the schedule of additional letters or Brighton Parish Council requesting for this to be deferred? What weight as a committee should we expect it to give to that request for deferment? Thank you.
I think I'll just start off by saying that there has been consultation here with Albrighton Parish Council, and they have, I think from memory, offered 2 lots of comment. We've basically been in a position that we've had right the way through the determination process. We've had a number of items sequentially submitted in relation to the application, and because of the sensitivity of the site, we've probably gone well beyond the level of consultation that we would normally undertake. We essentially, every additional item of information that's come in, we've reconsulted. In fact, I think I was in dialogue with the Parish Council clerk, because the representations were almost coming in faster at one stage than we could undertake the reconsultations and then the following consultation. There is a point here that they have had the opportunity to comment. I think also a significant point here is that the substance of the Parish Council's comment has been about the principle of the use of the site for providing housing for the elderly. That comment hasn't changed even when they've submitted revised comments, whereas the additional information that has been submitted has related essentially to other issues. So I don't think that the additional information that has been submitted really addresses the objection that's been made by the Parish Council, which they have made. So in that respect, I don't think we would be depriving the Parish Council of their opportunity to make their substantive point, which again has been made here today.
Councillor Parsons, please.
This is a tricky one in my view. I mean, obviously, the site has already been identified as being a site for development, as Councillor Marshall acknowledged. And also, the route into that site was always going to be this particular road, which is causing concern, obviously, to the residents that live along that road. So those two things were always there. And we then have to look at what's being brought forward. And really only if it was to be a poor development, an awful development, would we probably consider rejecting it, because, it's something that we have identified. I heard a lot of points being raised, and the issue with regards to these properties being relevant for retired people. And, I've seen that within my ward. It's not always the case that bungalows are built for the retired. I've had McCarthy and Stone building a 2-storey apartment block within my ward. So, these sorts of things are not, against the actual policy. And similarly, in Weir Hill and along the Otley Road, we've had lots of retired people buying 4- and 5-bedroom houses. So it happens. So it's a case of, is that something that is so wrong in this instance that we should be rejecting that application? And I'm in two minds on that. I mean, the other two issues that were the other side of the balance for me were the ecology and trees issue, but that seems to have been resolved, and I'm glad it's been resolved on site rather than passing it off to an off-site provision. And the other one is the public open space, which again, in my areas, I've seen, the banks of the A5 being used as public open space, and the ponds along the Otley Road on the Bellway development and whatever. So it's not unusual. So I just say, is this so bad that we should be refusing it when we've already identified the site as one for development?
Thank you, Councillor Parsons. Any more comments, please? Right, is anybody willing to make a recommendation? Andrew, you want to come back in?
Yeah, if I could just come back on that last point, Chair. As an officer, I have to say, it was quite a difficult report to write insofar as we have a site here that is subject to an allocation in the development plan, and we're supposed to determine applications in accordance with the development plan. Having said that, the flip side is that just because you've made an allocation in the development plan doesn't mean that you can completely disregard all the... It's not so much the principle of what's proposed as that, how it's actually being done. And it's pretty well standard with most development plan allocations. It doesn't matter whether it's housing or any other type of development, that the allocation is qualified with ensuring that whatever proposal actually comes forward is in itself acceptable in terms of the detailed issues that are raised. So it has to be acceptable in all other respects as well. So although we have an allocation here, it doesn't automatically mean that it should be approved. You still need to ensure there is an acceptable development there. So the judgment here today is, if there's recognition in terms of the principle, then is it otherwise acceptable? And that's really what's at issue here today. The access point is a slightly complicating issue because a slightly more complicated issue because the allocation is actually made on the basis that the access would have been taken through Garage Coast as actually proposed. So that's a slightly more implicit part of the allocation. But again, that's something you need to bear in mind.
Just a question. Could the old access be used for building the site and then closed off once the site is complete?
I think that would actually be in practice be quite difficult because it's really quite narrow and it's surrounded very closely on each side with hedgerows and trees. So I suspect that's probably not a feasible option.
Thank you. Councillor Artin, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've listened quite carefully to what's been said by members and particularly the local member and some of the people objecting. I was in two minds initially about this particular application. I think I've listened carefully also to what the officers have said, and this is very clearly a very balanced application. I think on balance, I'm minded not to support it, and I would like to make a proposal that we reject it. It's marginal, but I think the proposal doesn't really take account sufficiently well of what was originally proposed to be allocated on the site, which is focused towards retirement. I'm not so keen so sure that the ecological aspects have been sufficiently well dealt with. So I think we can use both of those options to defend if we were to go to appeal, for example. And I think on balance, for me, it falls down on the negative side rather than the positive side. So I'd like to make a proposal that we refuse this application.
Could you give the reasons, Nigel, please?
For the reasons that I've suggested, which are that there's insufficient provision of the type of housing that the locality needs. There is insufficient insufficient attention given to the ecological aspects. So the applicant has tried, but not gone far enough. So I think we can possibly defend both of those.
Thank you, Nigel. Could I have Councillor Marshall, please?
On the grounds, exactly, that I think the development is not setting out what initially was said with the retirement homes, I would second the proposal for rejection.
Thank you very much. Anybody else wish to comment, please? Andrew, do you want to come back?
Yeah, just to provide a bit of advice in terms of the way, if you are minded to refuse it, one of the issues that are highlighted here is paragraph 196 of the MPPF in relation to the impact on the conservation area as well, because that stresses the whole point of balance. I mean, the balance in itself for the issues that have just been outlined stands in its own right, but it also forms part of that equation in relation to the fact that there is an impact
happy to
on
include
heritage
that as well.
assets. So my advice would be put that in as well.
Okay, if seconder agrees, happy to include that.
Councillor Tyndall.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I should push the design element further. I mean, I've said what I thought about the design. I mean, can it be a ground?
Yeah, it's one of those issues where it's quite appropriate to raise the issue. And I mean, I've said myself in the report, I don't think the design is anything to shout about, particularly in relation to the fact that the part of the site is in the conservation area. So, I wouldn't say it's something you shouldn't raise. I think it's quite reasonable to put that in as an additional consideration.
Would the proposer and seconder agree that that could be another reason for...
Yes, I would, yes.
Sorry?
Yes.
Yes, I'm happy with that.
We've got a proposer and a seconder to refuse the application on the reasons given, which is noted by our solicitor. So all those in favour of refusal of the application, show your hands, please. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 8-4 against. Abstentions, please. 2 abstentions. Thank you. Okay, next application is number 6, the bungalow Ragdon. Tim, please.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, yes, I'd like to draw members' attention to the late representation sheet. Bottom of page 1, bottom of page 1 of that sheet, there's a reference to a further submission from an objector to the proposed development, who's contacted the council on several occasions concerned about the impact of this proposal in terms of flooding, contribution to localised flooding, and also more significantly, I think, potential impact on their drinking water source, which is a borehole. You'll also see at the top of page 2 that the drainage agent acting for the applicant has very recently submitted a more detailed topographical survey with supporting calculations, which is intended to clarify possible concerns about the impact on flooding and the impact on the neighbour's borehole. That information is still currently being assessed by the drainage and flood risk manager within the council, who will be commenting further once he's had the opportunity to consider that. So based on that, officers are now recommending that this application be deferred to a later committee, because we don't believe that it's possible to come to a sound decision without assessing that further information submitted by the applicant. That's not suggesting that or accepting that there is a serious adverse impact on either flooding or on the drinking water from the borehole, but we need to make that further assessment before we can make a firm recommendation to you. So if you're prepared to move that the application be deferred, I'd be happy for members to make that vote before going further with the application.
I'm happy to defer the application under the officer's recommendation. Could I have a seconder, please?
I'm seconding it.
Thank you. All those in favour of deferment, please? Thank you. That is unanimous. Thank you. We will now take a 5-minute comfort break for everyone. So see you in about 5-10 minutes. Thank you. We're going to item number 7, which is Condover Village Hall, Condover, Shrewsbury. Tim, please.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, could I once again draw members' attention to the late representation sheet in respect of this item. You will see there are some late comments from the Council's ecology team in relation to the potential for impact on bats. It's a very late submission, and that is picked up by further comments below that from the planning officer, so which picks up that the ecology team don't have sufficient information to assess whether there will be an adverse impact on bats, and therefore it's contrary to policy. And you will see below that quite a long response from the applicants about the tardiness of the response from the ecology team and the reasons behind that, and the fact that there, as far as they're aware, there is no evidence of bats, and that they are prepared to carry out further investigation if required. The officer suggests within their comments that the lack of information could be included as a reason for refusal, or as an additional reason for refusal. So as that suggests, the recommendation before you is that the current application be refused. Now, if members do decide to run with the recommendation, I think it's possible and it would be prudent to include the lack of information with regard to bats as an additional reason. If subsequently the applicants appeal that decision, it's likely that they could provide information during the course of an appeal. Sorry, Councillor Hart?
I was just indicating to the Chair I would like to ask you a question afterwards.
Oh, right, sorry. Okay. If there was a subsequent appeal, it's possible that information could be submitted that might demonstrate that there is no potential impact on bats, at which point the council could withdraw that reason for refusal. So that's something for members to think about in terms of the resolution. If I turn to the application itself, I'll run through the slides first, and then through the report as I did on the previous submission. So if we could move to the next slide, please. So that basically just identifies the application site. So the area in blue is the area around the village hall, and the village hall itself is outlined in red on that plan. If we could move to the next slide, please. That's just a larger plan identifying the site. If we keep moving forward. Right, so the elevation there in the top left-hand corner of the slide before you shows the front elevation of the building with the solar panels and the location of the solar panels, the solar array on the front plane of the roof to the property. You see it in plan form on the right-hand side of the proposal there, of the diagram. If we could move to the next slide, please. What that shows you is right in the centre of that plan, or almost the centre of that plan, the dark shaded building is the application site, i.e. the village hall, and the dots, the red coloured properties around that are actually listed buildings. So the site is within a conservation area, and as you will see by that, is surrounded by quite a significant number of listed buildings, although it is not listed in its own right. It is actually considered as a non-designated heritage asset within the conservation area. If we could move on to the next slide, please. Yes, the right-hand one of the photographs there is the building in question, the village hall building in question, and you'll recall that the array of solar panels would be on the front plane of the roof there, not above the half-timbered element of the building, but on the left-hand side of the roof that forms the front plane of the roof that across the building. So the left-hand side of the roof, as you look at that, the left-hand photograph is just the approach to the centre of the village and the village hall there. We could have the next slide, please. Again, that's looking back the other way towards the centre of the village and the right-hand side. So that's the roof of the village hall looking from the other direction. So again, it wouldn't the panels wouldn't sit above the black and white element to the front elevation, but above the brick, the red brick, the fully red brick part of the building. Next slide, please. These subsequent slides show the end gable of the proposed building and the buildings at the rear, the additions, the single-storey element of the buildings at the rear, which is where there would be some wall-mounted air source heat pump units. The report, I think, makes it clear that the officers have no concerns about the air source heat pumps units or the location of them. It's the solar panels that is the point of concern. If we could go to the next slide, please. Again, this is just showing the area of flat roof above which the air source heat pumps units would be located. So around the rear of the building, not clearly visible highly visible from any direction, and therefore, as I say, not a matter of concern as far as officers are concerned. Next slide, I think, or is that's the end of the slides. Yeah, the report sets out the primary considerations in a bit of detail. Clearly, it's a balanced judgment to be made here. There are the aim of the proposal to install these alternative energy proposals are in themselves laudable and would provide a green form of energy that would reduce the dependency on kind of other forms of energy, more harmful forms of energy. By the village hall and the use of the village hall, but also there is the visual impact of those solar panels on that front elevation of the building in what is quite a sensitive location, even acknowledging that the building itself isn't listed. So the report, as I say, sets out the considerations that the balance of those considerations, and as officers we have come down on the side of a negative recommendation in this instance, accepting that's a disappointment, will be a disappointment to the parish council, because they've tried to kind of address the concerns that have been raised throughout the consideration of the proposal, but we do feel that roof is particularly prominent within a sensitive part of the village, and therefore we unfortunately can't support it. So the recommendation before you is for refusal for the reasons set out at the head of the report. I think, Chair, that's all I'm intending to say at this stage, but I'm happy to take questions during the course of the debate. Thank you.
Councillor Harting, please.
Yeah, two questions really. The first one is in relation to the bat issue that you mentioned earlier. Are we happy that to go ahead and determine it, given the fact that we haven't got the information about bats? Would it be something that we might want to consider deferring? I'll ask that question first. If you can answer that one and come back with something else.
Well, first of all, the recommendation is to refuse. So it depends on what members' resolution is. If you were to follow the recommendation, then of course it would be reasonable to determine it. And as I've said, it could be added as a second reason for refusal, albeit it might fall away on appeal. But if members were minded to approve the application, then I suspect that we would make a request that you leave the imposition of conditions on that approval to officers in terms of a delegation. And one of the conditions we would look to impose would be a requirement to provide further information and investigation about bats and to provide adequate mitigation. It's not something that couldn't be overcome, but it would require potential mitigation.
Thank you. And the other thing was in relation to what we have in para 621, page 95, about the second from last paragraph, talking about the potential for their for the type of panels which could potentially be provided, which hasn't been brought forward as part of the application. Instead of refusal, have you thought, could we perhaps then, if we were minded to approve it, could we not include a condition to make sure that the applicant put in place the type of panels that is being talked about in para 621?
Sorry, I didn't catch the first part of it. So I think I got...
It's in page 95.
Yeah.
Second from last paragraph on 621, just before 63, where it talks about low visual impact, black framed, black beamed, wireless, no silver thread visible, etc. The sorts of things I thought we ought to be able to deal with by condition if we were minded to approve.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. And if members are minded to approve, then, as I say, we would ask, in all probability, that we be given delegated powers to consider appropriate conditions, but the type and the finish of the solar panels would definitely be something that we would look to include.
Thank you.
Councillor Park.
My question has already been asked. It was the second one there, in that obviously there are now different styles of solar panels, and if we could find some that would fit in more appropriately with the building, could we use that as a condition?
Councillor Luff, please.
Sorry about that. I have to keep my hand on it. The question that they have asked, but the other question is, my understanding of solar panels is that they have a sort of a lifespan. So could we have a condition put on as well that when their lifespan is over, that they then have to take them down or replace them? I mean, it is very much Shropshire Council's policy, I believe, that we should be looking to go green. And, you know, I would be concerned if we were not encouraging that, if we could, and if at all possible.
Yes, indeed. In fact, obviously, installation of solar panels on some properties is permitted development. It doesn't actually require planning permission. But where we get planning applications for solar panels, or be that freestanding or on buildings, we would, as a matter of course, or automatically impose conditions requiring them to be removed if no longer used for energy production, and they be maintained so that they are or replaced, so I should say, if necessary, to continue their production. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ignat, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is another one of those decisions that's balanced, in my opinion, and sort of goes up to the line. I am a bit concerned that with legislation coming through to ban the sale of new gas boilers, oil boilers are already not regarded as being a good option. Log burners seem to be on the way out. I'm concerned here that if we set a precedent of saying we don't like the look of the solar panels on the roof, this building is not listed. I myself live in a listed building, black and white 1600s, and I wouldn't want solar panels on my house. Having said that, listed buildings and older buildings are often the hardest to heat. The north-facing elevation of my house is as cold as a fridge this time of year. Sometimes that's nice when you have a heat wave. But it's difficult to heat in the winter, and I'm heated by gas at the moment. I'm concerned that if we start turning down these saying we don't like the look of the solar panels, and I can understand that there are some really nice buildings in Condover.
Can I just come here? Can I just ask the speakers before we go into a full-blown...
Oh, sorry, I didn't realise there were speakers. Yep, I thought we were going on this. Thank you. I defer.
Right, we have got speakers on this. We've got Condover Parish Council. The solicitor's got a letter to read out from there.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Condover Parish Council comments. Condover Parish Council is proud of its beautiful surroundings, its stunning views and its historic significance. It is understood why Condover Village Hall is being classed as a non-designated heritage asset and the significance of this in regard to the current planning application. The Parish Council resolved to support the application and welcomes the opportunity to set out reasons for this. When in 2019 Shropshire Council declared a climate emergency, the draft Condover Parish Neighbourhood Plan was immediately reviewed to ensure the integration of strategies to tackle climate change across all policies. The policies have been further reviewed following the adoption by Shropshire Council of its corporate climate strategy and action plan in December 2020. This plan established the objective of achieving net zero carbon performance for the Council by 2030. It also set an ambition for the Council to become energy self-sufficient by 2030. The Emerging Shropshire Local Plan 2016 to 2038 recognises the Climate Change Act 2008, which introduced a legally binding target for the UK to reduce its carbon emissions by at least 80% by 2050 compared to 1990 levels. Para 3.2 of this plan states, "This is a very challenging target and the planning system will need to play a full role in its achievement. Commitment to achieving net zero is further expressed in the Emerging Shropshire Local Plan 2016 to 2038 through the following planning policies. SP3 Climate Change. Development in Shropshire will support the transition to a zero carbon economy in accordance with the policies of the local plan by SP3.1 reducing carbon emissions through a number of means, of which paragraph 1G states promoting fabric energy efficiency, including as part of the retrofitting of existing buildings. SP3.2 integrating or supporting both on and off-site delivery of renewable and low-carbon energy, of which paragraph 2C states supporting development of community energy generation schemes where they meet the policy requirements of the local plan and any relevant national policy. In SP4 Sustainable Development, the Emerging Shropshire Local Plan also recognises that during this time of significant and fundamental transition, existing policies may have become out of date. SP4 Paragraph 3. Where there are no policies relevant to a planning application or the policies which are most important to determining the application are out of date at the time of making the decision, then planning permission will be granted unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The development of local and national government strategy and global action on the climate emergency combined with the policies presented in the Emerging Shropshire Local Plan 2016 to 2038 provide material planning considerations to support this planning application. The outcome of the installation of solar panels to provide the electricity to drive air source heat pumps would be a heating system at Condover Village Hall, which is forward-thinking, off-grid, self-fuelling and with zero carbon emissions. This in turn would deliver a sustainable future for a valuable community resource and a recognised heritage asset. The Parish Council would urge Shropshire Council to place the utmost importance on acting to address the climate emergency and to draw fully on those policies in the Emerging Shropshire Local Plan 2016 to 2038 that aim to deliver sustainable renewable energy and reduce carbon emissions to zero.
Thank you. I'm now going to letter from Dan Morris, who's a local member, and the solicitor will read that out, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Shropshire Council recently declared a climate emergency. 2100671 full is a sustainable scheme that is sympathetic to the built environment and financially literate. I urge members to give greater weight to the declaration of a climate emergency than to what one could argue are micro concerns indicated about the visual impact of the PV array on the immediate area. Furthermore, I would also argue that by turning down such an application with no negative comments by Condover residents about the application, Shropshire Council would send a signal contrary to the direction of travel indicated by Shropshire Council in its concerns over environmental impacts. I am surprised that SC officers only saw fit to mention the need for bat surveys 1 or 2 days before determination at committee. With regard to these very late recent submissions from the planning team regarding bats, SC didn't originally consult with the ecology officers or request an ecology survey. Outside a conservation area, fitting solar panels would generally be permitted development with no ecological surveys carried out. On a similar planning application on an existing building in the Wem conservation area, there was no ecological survey and no mention of bats. Permission was granted. The details are 21-00221 full. Installation of 28 solar panels on roof slopes at 24 Noble Street, Wem, Shrewsbury, Shropshire SY4 5DZ. If this bat work is indeed used as a reason to either refuse or delay the application, it also would appear to set a precedent that previously didn't exist. Any disturbance to bats is minimal, especially where the solar panels are on the roof rather than in roof. Are on roof rather than in roof. Fitting them would be like carrying out a roof repair, and SC doesn't expect or require a bat survey to be carried out, as evidenced by previous applications where permission was granted. Finally, some committee members may remember back in April, SC planning officers saw fit to approve the tripling of lorries through the same conservation area on a recent quarry planning application. This recommendation for refusal seems to give the narrative that it is okay for SC to approve the tripling of lorries through a narrow conservation area, but they won't allow solar panels in the same area. Sends a very contradictory message to residents of Condover, none of who have objected to the solar panels, about the environmental priorities of FC planning policy. I respectfully ask the committee to approve the application as it is. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Kim. I also have a speaker, Roger Nash, please. Roger Nash. And Roger Nash is speaking for the applicant. Thank you, Roger. You have 3 minutes to address the committee.
Thank you. Condover Village Hall trustees set objectives to provide an effective and efficient heating system for the hall for the next 2 or 3 decades, which would also address current environmental and climate change issues. The integrated system proposed was devised after extensive consultation and research. It uses heat produced by air-source heat pumps with power produced by photovoltaic panels linked to battery storage. The system is designed to maintain an ambient temperature in the hall, which could be raised when required. Planners have raised concern about possible noise intrusion from the heat pumps and the visual intrusion from the solar panels on the heritage asset in a conservation area. Trustees have had a continual dialogue with the planning department and have produced a raft of additional information and photographic evidence to demonstrate that the heat pumps will not be visible to neighbours or passers-by, and any noise generated will be virtually inaudible. Solar panels, by their very nature, are visible on buildings, but we acknowledge and have taken steps to address the concerns expressed by the conservation officer. Photographs, including a photo montage of the panels we intended to use, show that the visual intrusion caused by the array would be minimal. Furthermore, the siting of the panels compares very favourably with a similar example shown in the documentation produced by Historic England, Energy Efficiency and Historic Buildings. The array makes no permanent change to the structure of the hall and represents a completely reversible solution should it become necessary to remove the panels in the future. Our integrated approach to heating the hall will produce a near-zero energy building, will lower the hall's carbon footprint and will take little energy from the national grid. We believe this more than compensates for the minimal visual intrusion of the panels. Whilst we acknowledge that there are alternative ways to power the heat pumps, these solutions do little to create a near-zero energy building and cut the demand on the national grid at a time when it's likely to be under considerable pressure due to the charging demands from electrically powered vehicles. We understand that heritage buildings can be exempt from certain planning and building control regulations, but feel it would be wrong not to take a positive step to address the urgent environmental issues in a project that will be in place for the next 25 years. When upgrading the heating of the hall, trustees wanted to actively support government and council initiatives and believe their plan is a small but nonetheless invaluable contribution to addressing Shropshire's declared climate emergency. We therefore request that the committee grants permission for the integrated installation, including the solar array, without further delay.
Thank you. Are there questions for Mr Nash, please? Any questions? No? Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, there's one. You got a question? Okay.
Yes, thank you, Mr Nash. In relation to the report at page 95, where it talks about the applicants being prepared to accept black back panels, can you just confirm that you would be prepared to accept low visual and black flame, black backed panels, as is detailed at 621?
Could I explain that the dialogue we've had with the planners obviously included some discussion about the type of panels that we wanted to use. The description that you described earlier in the meeting was given to us at a very early stage, and the panels that we put in our exemplar were exactly to that specification. They don't deviate it from it at all. And they were actually the photographs used when we made the photo montage showing what the array would look like on the building. Further photographs were given to the planning office, but they weren't showed in the display that you had at the beginning of the presentation. But they are on the list of photographs that are in the planning application that you had a look at. And this shows that both the detailed specification of the panel and a photograph of one actually in position on a building and with an array of 16 panels rather than 18 panels as we intended to put. So I can't understand why there is so much concern about us using the right panel. If there is a better panel, we've always said that we would use whatever panel that the committee would approve of.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Right, Councillor Hignett, you can carry on where you left off, if you like.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I didn't realise we weren't into full debate, so apologies for that. I'll finish off briefly then, because some of the points that I was in the middle of making have actually been mentioned in the last 2 or 3 minutes. I just think I would make the point that whereas a few years ago there was a lot of concern about satellite dishes and TV aerials on roofs in conservation areas and that sort of thing, they're now commonplace, and I do believe that these solar panels, if we're going to comply with legislation in the few years going forward and to get to zero carbon by 2030, these panels are going to become commonplace on almost all buildings, perhaps not grade 1 and grade 2 listed buildings, but you have to put them where they face the predominant sun arc as it goes around during the day. So I just think they will be commonplace, and we need to be careful if we're going to start refusing these. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Tyndall, please.
Yes, if we could just look at page 95, the penultimate paragraph. Is the case officer actually saying that it's not clear that the applicants would have the flexibility to meet a condition to provide further details before implementation? It seems to me that what Dr. Nash has just said confirms that he can.
Would you like to come back there, Tim, please?
Sorry, could you just refer me to where you were?
Yes, sorry, Tim, it's page 95.
Yeah.
The penultimate paragraph of section 6.21.
I think that paragraph is referring to, I may be wrong, but I think it's referring to the need for them to apply for grant funding and the timescales behind that. I may be wrong, but from what we've heard from the speaker, the intended units do meet the requirements of those as set out there. So I mean, I think it would still be prudent to include a condition requiring details to be agreed the final details to be agreed if your members were minded to go down approval. But it's that suggestion that, and from the speaker, what the speaker said, that there is some flexibility, notwithstanding the fact that they are intending to use the panels that would meet the requirements of that paragraph anyway. Could I, Chair, are you okay if I just say something else as well, just whilst I'm talking? Just with regard to the late issue of BATS and the late comments received, I would just refer you back to the late representation sheet, page 3 of that, and the item that's or the paragraph that's just over under the midpoint of that page, which is the planning officer's response to the concerns raised about the late involvement of the ecology team. And you'll see there that it arose as a result of it becoming clear that there was more work involved to the roof than was originally indicated or anticipated. So that was the reason why the ecology team were consulted later on in the application, and partially why their comments were received so late in the determination of or the consideration of the application. Don't think I need to say anything else at this point, Chair. Thank you.
I remember when roof lights first became common with attic conversions and barn conversions, and they of course look black. The glazing looks black, and they designed a heritage roof light, which I think was slightly recessed into the roof. Given that the planning officer in the late reps, page 3, says that there will be lifting of tiles and installation of supports to the roof, would it be technically possible to recess the panels so that they're not proud of the roof line? They are actually set back, like heritage roof lights are. I'm not suggesting that the actual area of solar panel is reduced, it's just that they go back into the roof.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I'm not an expert in these things by any means, so but I think that final detail and that possibility could be considered as a result of any condition requiring the details to be agreed. Yeah.
Councillor Loft, please. Councillor Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. Last week we were debating 1,000 houses. That seems a hell of a lot easier than solar panels. I totally agree with Councillor Ignett. I think if we start rejecting plans that reduce our carbon footprint, I think that puts us on a really slippery slope. I think we should be actively encourage things that can reduce our carbon footprint. And I do believe this, and I'm weighing it up and looking at it, that it's on a non-designated heritage asset. Yes, do I really want to look at solar panels? No. But I actually weigh up, I think, the benefit that they do over it. So I would actually motion that we do accept the proposal on the grounds that it is beneficial towards lowering the carbon footprint.
Thank you, Councillor Marshall. So that's a proposal for the application.
I'm happy to second that, Chair.
You're willing to second that? Okay, Councillor Hartin, please.
Yeah, I'd like to support that, but I think we would need some form of condition in there just to make sure that what Dr. Nash has said is doable, actually happens, such that we have the low impact, low black frames, panels, etc. And the other issue that Councillor Tyndall talked about in terms of whether it can be recessed can be dealt with by your comment, Tim.
Thank you, Chair. So I can see, before you take a vote on the seconded motion, clearly I think it's based on the fact that members are saying the balance, that they believe that if it's carried, that the balance is slightly in favour of the the kind of the green benefits, the green energy credentials of the proposal, and that outweighs, as the report sets out. It's a balanced decision anyway, so that, in members' opinion, that would outweigh the visual harm to the non-designated heritage asset and the conservation area, etc. But I would ask, Chair, that if members are minded to go with the motion, that the imposition of condition be delegated to us as officers, having heard the debate and what is required in that respect, that we impose the conditions that we've both discussed and heard about the final design of the panels and their removal when no longer required, etc. Thank you.
I go along with that if the proposer is willing to accept it and the seconder is willing to accept that we give the power to the officers to negotiate conditions and everything else. Okay, so we go against officer's recommendation. We're going to approve the application that it goes ahead with the conditions. All those in favour, please. That is unanimous. Thank you. We now go into item number 8, which is Dowell's Cottage, Dowell's Road, Bewdley. Is that Andrew, please?
Thank you, Chair. Chair, this is a very simple, straightforward application. Just to start off with, you'll see there's three actually, late reps. One from Councillor Butler and another from the Parish Council. Essentially, this application has only been brought to committee. It's a very, very simple, straightforward application. It was only brought to committee because the local member requested within the 21-day period that it come to committee. And then you'll see from the late representation that, in fact, Councillor Butler has essentially advised that that's no longer the case. However, the application has been put on the agenda, and the advice from the legal officers is that, accordingly, the application can be determined by committee. So, hence it's here. And I'll just draw your attention to the late representations. The application on the face of it is for a two-storey extension and a single-storey rear extension, two-storey side extension and a single-storey rear extension to Dowell's Cottage at Dowell's Road, Bewdley. As is set out in the report, this is actually essentially an application to vary a proposal that's been previously granted planning permission, and in fact, what's essentially different to this is the fenestration on the building. So what I'll do is I'll just run through the slides very quickly. I've just lost them off my screen. There we go. Yeah, so Dowell's Cottage, I don't know if you're familiar with this is literally the first and last building in the county, in that the county boundary actually runs through the application site here, with the site itself sitting on the county boundary between Shropshire and Worcestershire as you come out of the Wyre Forest. So the county boundary actually runs through the bottom of the site there, but the building itself is actually in Shropshire. This is a location where there was a new house built as a replacement for an older house that was originally there, and then there's been a series of subsequent applications for extensions to the house. We can just run through to the next slide. The main bit of the building is the bit that you'll see on the plan in front of you now, and then there's an extension out to the rear that's already there. And then if we can go on to the next slide, you'll actually see these are actually the existing plans. Again, that just highlights the extension at the back of the building. If we can go forward to the next slide. So you'll see that's actually got the extension that's now proposed, which is that section on the right-hand side of the building, bearing in mind that this has already been granted consent, and this is just simply to amend the detail. So what's actually different between what's been consented now and, what's been consented and what's proposed now, is that you'll see in the right-hand drawing there, there's an additional balcony that's being installed. It's the bit that's at the top of the extension, if you can see the difference between the two parts of the drawing there. So on the left-hand side, there's no balcony there, and on the right-hand side, you can see the balcony. And then there's some additional alterations to the fenestration. So if we can just move on to the next couple of slides. I can can actually see this. So I'm sorry, it's very small. It'll be very small on your screens, but you can see in the drawing at the bottom of the right-hand side of the screen there, there's a, you won't be able to read it, I think, on the screen, but there's some annotations to the text. So there's alteration to the ground floor window, which would have been where the balcony was originally proposed, which is now to become a window, and you'll see on the roof there's a roof light to go in. And then on the drawing in the middle on the right-hand side, you'll see where the balcony is shown, the way the balcony is now to be moved to. So in essence, the balcony has moved round the corner from the north side of the building to the west side. And that is essentially the application insofar as the extension itself has already been approved. The extension has actually been built on the back of the original consent that was granted. We can just move on to the next slide. I think we may be into the photographs, so there's just 2 or 3 photographs. That's the house. You can't actually see the extension on that particular shot. There's a series of photographs here that were taken a year ago before the extension has been built, and the extension has actually just been built in the last year. So there's a couple of photographs on the end here that show it with the extension. So if we can just scroll through to the next photograph, please. This is the photograph a year ago. I think it's actually dated February 2020. So you can see that this is the north elevation where the extension would actually go. So it would attach onto this end wall of the house, and this is taken before it was built. And if we can scroll to the next photograph, that's just a similar view. That shows the extension out, the existing extension out of the back of the building. One of the key points here is that the balcony that's going to be put in will actually be visible above that roof to the adjoining house, and you'll see from the report that the issue is whether or not there's any impact on the adjoining property. And then if we can scroll to the next photograph, that's just, again, that's that photograph from a year ago, and then I think the next photograph shows it as it is now. So I'm sorry, this is at a distant view, but can you actually see now that there's an additional section to the building right at the back, which protrudes further to the left, and that's the extension that's now been built. This photograph, I've basically included it because it's down where the adjoining houses are. So that's the view from the adjoining houses, and the issue was in relation to the timber building that's on the left-hand side of that photograph as to whether or not there was going to be any overlooking. And you'll see from the comments that have been submitted from Councillor Butler is that he's spoken to the occupants of the adjoining houses here, and they've essentially now withdrawn their concerns about the impact. I think there's one more photograph, which I think is a slightly closer view. So you can just see to the left of the tree there, that's the new window with the balcony. But you can see that it's at some distance away, and there's no direct overlooking at all. So the recommendation essentially is that there isn't any significant impact on the adjoining properties. There's certainly no direct overlooking, and what view is a distant one, and that's a bleak angle. So the recommendation is to approve. But as I say, it's not really for the extension as a whole. It's purely for those changes to the fenestration. So it's a very, very simple, straightforward application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody wish to comment, please? Councillor Tindall.
I think this is totally uncontroversial, and were it not for the fact that the objections can't be withdrawn, I think I got that right, I propose that we accept the officer's recommendation, and I look to have a seconder, please.
I'll second from the chair, Councillor Tindall. So we've got a proposal and a second. All those in favour? It's just a matter of moving with the balcony. Thank you. To item number 9, Sunny Hill, Summerhouse Lane, Longdon. Tim, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, actually, this is something that's not dissimilar to the application that that Andrew's just presented to you, and it's a variation to an approved extension on a dwelling, which, as I'll explain in a few minutes, just sets out some changes to what was previously approved in 2020. The only reason that this is on the agenda before you is that the applicant is a member of staff, and under the scheme of delegation, certain members of staff who report to certain directors, any application of theirs has to come before a planning committee. So if I just run through the, sorry, if I run through the slides, if that, again, so what we're not considering here is the is really the bulk of the extension. It's really some minor changes to the proposal. Those are actually existing plans of the dwelling in question, except for the bottom one on the right-hand side, which shows the approved extension coming off at an angle. So you'll see that comes off on the left-hand side of the dwelling as you look at the plan at an angle. So, and that's the bulk of the extension, plus a single-storey rear extension, which has a kind of a lantern roof above it. If we could go on to the next slide, please. So there you would see the kind of the roof plan and floor plans of the dwelling. It's quite a substantial dwelling, you know, with quite a substantial addition. But as I say, that has already been approved. What I would point out is one of the elements that is currently, the amendments that's currently being sought is the creation of a small balcony with a glass balustrade around. So if you look at the third diagram down on the left-hand side, that's the first floor plan of the property with the extension. So the upper part of that is the rear extension with the lantern, and the intention is to create a set of double doors out onto a small part of that flat roof that would be enclosed by the balustrade. And you can see that balustrade, the outline of that on the roof. So it's only a small area of that flat roofed rear. It's not the use of the whole of the flat roof as a balcony that is being sought. If you just bear with me 1 second, get back to the right page of the report. So at paragraph 1.5 of your report on page 110, there's a bulleted list of points that are being of amendments that are being sought through this current application. So there's an enlarged dormer to the front elevation, a porch to the secondary entrance, the removal of a chimney, some alterations in cladding, and the installation of the glass balustrade as I've referenced already, and a balcony velux window to the rear roof elevation. There are no concerns from officers in respect of the proposed amendments, and there are no objections from any party, and no implications that we can see in respect of the residential amenity of neighbouring occupiers. So subject to the conditions as set out, Chair, the recommendation is for approval. I'll just run through some photographs quickly, I think, if we move on with the slides. So that's the property as existing. So you've got the front elevation, the rear elevation, and the direct from the eastern boundary of the property. As you can see, in this case, the extension hasn't already been built. I think that's the end of the slide. Is it? Yeah. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tim. Now open it up to committee, please. Any member wish to speak, please? No. Councillor Parsons, please.
I'll move that we accept officers' recommendations and approve this application.
Thank you, Councillor Parsons. Have we got a second for that, please? Councillor Ignat, thank you. So we've got one proposer and a seconder. All those in favour of the application, please. It's unanimous, thank you. Now going to item number 10, which is Folgate Lane, Ludlow. Is that you, Andrew? Yep. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, Chairman, this is another relatively straightforward application. This is another one of these applications where the request to bring it to committee was made by the local member within 21 days. So I should have said, just for the benefit of the new members, if you're not familiar with the procedure, but if a request is made for an application to come to committee within 21 days of the local member being notified, then it automatically comes to the committee and there's no discretion about it. So this is one of these applications. The proposal here, as set out in the report, is essentially for the demolition of the conservatory at the back of the existing house at 11 Foldgate View, and then the construction of an extension at the back, with which is a more solid structure. If we just run through the plans, so that shows you the location of Foldgate View, which is in behind, I think it's behind the commercial estate where the garage and Pets at Home is on just off the Ludlow Ring Road. If we can go to the next slide. So you'll see these are relatively modern bungalows. The drawing on the left there at the top shows the house with the existing it's both drawings at the top show the building with the existing conservatory. It's the two different elevations there. So you've got the conservatory at what appears to be opposite ends, but it's just the two opposite sides of the building. And then at the bottom you'll see there's the house with the rebuilt or built extension in place of the conservatory. So you can see it's on the same footprint, but it's very marginally bigger. But in terms of the overall size and structure, it's not an enormous change. If we can go on to the next slide, if there is one, yeah. So there's just some photographs here, which show you I think the best thing to look at there is the photograph that's at the bottom left-hand corner, which shows the existing conservatory. And then you've got the elevation again on the right-hand side. So you'll see basically it's to take that conservatory away and then build the extension that's in the bottom right-hand corner of the slide. I think that may be the last one. Is there one more slide? Yeah, there's just some more photographs there. So again, that just shows you where the conservatory will come away and the extension has been built. I just draw your attention in that photograph to the fencing and the hedging that are on the side there, which screen it from the adjoining property. I think that's the last slide. Oh no, there's one more. Much of a muchness. And more. Sure, that's it. There we go. So yeah, essentially that's the proposal. You'll see there has been an objection from a neighbour. There's one additional late representation, which I think may be from the objector, raising points about the impact on the neighbouring property. But the officer advice is that given that the conservatory is essentially the extension is a replacement for the conservatory, and given that it's relatively well screened from the adjoining property, the recommendation is for approval.
Thank you, Andrew. Committee? Have we a proposer for the application? Councillor Tyndall, happy to propose. Councillor Duff, second. All those in favour of the application, please. Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you. David? You object? Oh, we had one objection, sorry. Yeah. Thank you, David. Next application, number 42 Barrow Street, Much Wenlock. Is that Andrew or? Yep.
Thank you, Chair. This is yet another one that, very similar to the Dow's Cottage application, was originally brought to the committee at the request of the local member, who subsequently, I should say now the former local member, I'm trying to avoid it sounding like a Monty Python sketch and saying the ex-member, but who withdrew his request for it to come to committee. But nevertheless, we're in the same position as we are with the Dow's Cottage application, so it's on the agenda and it's for you here to determine. I'll very quickly run through the slides because you must well just see it's the easiest way to explain this, so if we can just run through the slides quickly. It's basically a proposal to put an extension on top of what's an existing single-storey garage and then an additional side extension. So if we can have the next slide, please. That just shows you the main plot, which is on Barrow Street in Much Wenlock, which if you don't know it too well, but that's the main road that comes down from the main street in Much Wenlock. And there's a series of sort of cottages and terraces running along that side of the street. And the next slide, please. And that just shows you the drawing, that's the view as existing. So the top right elevation there is the existing frontage onto the street with a garage on one side, which you'll see has got a mono pitch. And then at the bottom left-hand drawing, I think that's the right one. Yeah, that's the right one. There's an extension to go in there, which we'll see on the subsequent drawing. So it's just a small section that sits between the main bit at the back of the house and the boundary with the adjoining property, which you'll understand more when you see the proposed drawing. So if we can move on to the next slide. So what you've got there now is the top left-hand drawing there shows the extension that's been put on top of the garage with a pitched roof, and the garage door has been replaced with a substantially glazed window. Glazed window, it would be. And then the top right-hand drawing there, you can see it's actually the small white extension at ground floor level where the roof carries on down from the stone section of the building. So those are basically the two extensions to the building. There are no objections to this application. I think Councillor Turner's original concern was about the loss of the car parking space in the garage, but I think that the general view was it won't have too much impact. So he withdrew his request, and it's actually an application where there's representations in support of it and no objections. And that's it. So the recommendation is to approve.
Thank you, Andrew. Committee, can we have a proposal, please? Councillor Artin, thank you. And seconded by Councillor Caroline and everybody else. Right, all those in favour of the application, please show their hands. That is unanimous. Thank you. We now come on to a schedule of appeals. Is that for noted? Oh, sorry.
With Folgate, item 10.
Yeah?
Yeah. Oh. Sorry?
You're obviously asleep.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I haven't been asleep, I promise you.
Right. Item 12, schedule of appeals. Is that for noting, Tim, or are you going to go through them?
Could I? Yeah, thank you, Chair. I don't intend to say very much. As you'll see there, we've had since the last committee, we've had two appeals received. We've had three decisions, two of which have gone with the council, and one which was allowed for some paved hard standing area in Bridge North. The one I wanted to particularly draw your attention to is the middle one of the appeal decisions, the Riddings at Hopton Wafers, because this was an appeal that it was Andrew's appeal. Andrew and I were at the appeal hearing, and having had the appeal hearing, we weren't very optimistic about the outcome, because the inspector gave the kind of the clear, or we thought, a clear indication that he didn't particularly like the council's case, but that's clearly not the case, because he subsequently came up with this decision, the decision quickly, and it's actually very useful in terms of providing some guidance on the appropriate location of new tourist accommodation. We've had a barrage given COVID and the need for people to, or the need for people to holiday at home. We have had a barrage of applications looking to create new holiday accommodation, and of course we've got policies which support the provision of new tourist accommodation, but that clearly has to be in the right location, and it has to be in a sustainable location that has some access to settlements and the facilities that settlements provide within them, such as shops and a bus service or a pub or whatever. Clearly the inspector agreed with us that in this case that it failed to meet that requirement of the policy, and the appeal was dismissed. So it's useful in that it clearly outlines that it's not carte blanche, if you like, open season on any type of new holiday accommodation. It does have to be in the right location. So a useful decision.
Thank you, Tim. Right, date of the next meeting is July the 13th. I'd like to thank the officers for all the hard work of putting these applications together. I'd like to thank Kim, our solicitor, and I'd like to thank you as a committee, and thank you for all the input you've had in today. It's been very, very good. It's been a good meeting, and I'm sure we'll reach the right results. And all I'm doing now is wish you all a safe journey home. Thank you. Bye.